We are visiting the Playhouse today, and I'm so happy to welcome my husband and friend, Bill Steinkellner, one of my very oldest favorite friends, George McGrath, and one of my new favorite friends, Wayne White. So we're going to talk about all the things that, all things Pee-wee. We're going to start today by talking about the origins of the original Pee-wee Herman show that became Pee-wee's Playhouse, and the films and the legend. And then we're going to go into our topic du jour, subversion. So, and then we're going to open it up to all of you for all of your questions. So, origins. Paul Reubens came up with Pee-wee Herman in a class at the Groundlings, which is an improv troupe down in Los Angeles on Melrose. And it started with a Glen plaid suit that Gary Austin, the founder of the Groundlings, lent to Paul, who was the only other person in the troupe who was as skinny as he was. And Paul, so legend says, developed the character Pee-wee Herman. When he put on this suit, he became that particular soupy sales kids TV host character. Paul is quoted as saying, Pee-wee sort of seemed like a gimmick, and that's what I was looking for. A simple thing to hang a bunch of stuff on. And that's where Billy and Wayne and George came in. They were the stuff hangers upon which Pee-wee's stuff was hung. So in 1980, I know we're going to parse that sentence. In 1980, Pee-wee became a stage show at the Groundlings that quickly moved to the Roxy Theater on Sunset Boulevard. It was a parody, a complete parody, a subversion of a kids show that played at midnight and became an HBO special in 1981. 30 years later, stage production that began in LA moved to Broadway and really used pretty much the same script. So Bill, we're going to start with you. You were there for all of that. You were there at the genesis of Pee-wee. And as Paul's co-author and co-director and kind of improv facilitator, you had a finger in everything, and Paul, of course, had his finger and face in everything. At the beginning, there were Lynn Stewart as Missy Vaughn, Phil Hartman as Captain Carl, John Paragon as John B., some of the same characters who later showed up in the movies and on the TV show. So I want to ask you, Billy, what early memories do you have of the development of what would become this classic subversive phenomenon across media?
Good question. I would say, first of all, the very, very beginnings, except for what you just said, I think I've heard different variations of, so I'm not going to say any of those variations because I'm not really sure what was true. I know what's true for me, like some sort of philosophical statement. But I did, he did go from improvising that to finally doing sort of a one-man thing. I don't know what they call it, the Groundlings, that sort of down in one, I guess, spot. With the audience, we had audience participation as Pee-wee, and he would just do, one of the things he'd do a lot would be his bag of tricks, where he would just pull out different toys and items like that that were funny, like, a fake dog do and that. But I thought the really, the thing that really sold me in a way was he had one thing that was like a little rubber thing with a bulb, that you press like this and it would pump air in there. And then it would be like a little hopping frog. And it would look very cute, like when he did that. And he said, but watch this when you do this. And he turned it upside down and he pumped it. And these little legs went just like all up in the air like that. And it was hilarious. I mean, it was genuinely hilarious. And that in a nutshell, I think, is Pee-wee. That's the drive of Pee-wee, is that he's really interested in this thing that no one else notices sometimes, and he just goes with it. I remember developing it he was in a Cheech and Chong movie at the time. We would go to his trailer and develop it. We would go to his house in pouring rain and develop it. We would develop it driving along in his car. And Paul Reubens is like, you think, oh my God, why don't I have life insurance when you're driving with him in those days? Maybe he's calmer now, but he drove like a maniac. And it was that sort of, I actually been thinking about it because I went back and reread my diaries from that point period and all that. And I was surprised and delighted that I actually had something, but I think I am famous for my laugh. I mean, I'm like famous. I've gotten awards from high schools for being in the audience. And that's a big thing because as we're developing it, I'm laughing along with it. Like directors I see with improv who don't laugh, I'm like, what's your problem? This is all they've got. All they've got to tell them this is funny is your laughter. And so, if it's not really funny, you can change it later. But I think that was one of the reasons I got to be in there, because Paul really knew what he wanted in a way, or he had a strong feeling of what he wanted, and which is a great thing. But he was also like that little boy who finds the frog fascinating. He finds everything fascinating, and so he will veer off from it. And improv actors in general really like to create new stuff. They think that's the fun part, and in many ways it is. But when you finally develop it, then you have to set it. And so I would watch that and I would type it up, whatever the scene was, the one with Captain Carl and Miss Yvonne, and type it up and then would show it to him, and then we'd rehearse it. And I'm reading the diary from that period. I mean, it was insane. I'm like, I have a constant headache. We're rehearsed until 4:30 in the morning. I mean, and just like really insane stuff. And rehearsals are always insane, but usually you have a script. In this case, you have this sort of script that's there. It's not gelling exactly, and you have to kind of figure all those things out. Do you want to hear something I know we wrote from that period? Very short.
Sure. And then I want to, well, you know what, actually, let's hold that for a second. I want to come back to that, because something that Billy said about having a constant headache reminded me of something that I read you said, George, where the first year of filming the Pee-wee show, and I'm going to go back into a little bit of history on the Pee-wee show, but you described it as a sweatshop. So
well, the building, when the elevator would accidentally stop at the floor below, it literally was a sweatshop. It was just millions of women sitting at sewing machines, and you go, what's going on here? And it had no air conditioning, so they had to run this gigantic hose from the street, and it was always like boiling hot. And yeah, the hose from the street was classic. And there was a man that was attached to it who was also a very funny character. It was, I remember Shirley Stoller, who played Mrs. Steve in the first season. She would go, I'm drowning in my own moisture. When you ask her to do something, she'd do, okay, spin around, she would do this. It was just boiling hot.
And it was filthy. The space we were in, it was just really filthy loft that never really got cleaned. So it was grime everywhere.
Did you see the picture I put up yesterday of you, Wayne, in the original artist rendering room? It was like that.
Yeah, our horrible little hovel that we would go to. It was fun. It was downtown New York funky, and I think that those conditions and that context lent a lot of the soul to that first season, because we were just all a bunch of downtown New York artists working in a loft making a fake kiddie show.
So you were a downtown artist who never had any intention of becoming an iconic puppet character like Randy or Dirty Dog, did you?
No, I did not want to be an iconic puppet character. No, I didn't. I was a cartoonist and an illustrator, and that's where I thought my path was going to be. But at the same time, on the side, I was doing these crazy subversive puppet shows on my own as just an amateur at house parties and on the street and sometimes in galleries. So, and that's how I got the Pee-wee job, because I had this side gig as a puppeteer. And Yeah, so no, I went into Pee-wee with no real professional show business experience, and I think 80% of the art department was the same way. The actors had experience, but the art department, we were all just a bunch of ragtags, you know.
And you ragtags walked out. You walked in with no experience, and you walked out with how many Emmys?
3.
Very
Hey,
nice. Well
Cheri.
done.
Won your categories? You son of a bitch.
So
Cheri, can I-
George, you were not you are a New Yorker, but you did not come into this as a New York downtown artist.
No,
Tell us how you came into Pee-wee.
I came into it. Well, Paul came to see the Groundling show. Tracy Newman brought him to see the show. And I had never met him. The first Groundling show I ever saw, he was doing the Pee-wee character and throwing candy out into the audience. It was very funny. But he came backstage and said, who wrote this? Who wrote this? Who wrote this? And he liked the stuff I wrote. And the following week, I get a phone call. Hello, this is Paul Reubens. Show with me. And I said, sure. I had written a few episodes of a show called Kids Incorporated. So it wasn't the first kids show I ever had anything to do with. But so when we were writing them, I would do puppet voices, you know, as we're reading the scripts and whatever. And he brought me to New York to come and do those puppets live, you know.
So you were brought out to New York as a writer and a performer, correct?
Mostly as a performer because everything was written. I mean, there were things that I would help him rewrite, or the theme song was written while we were there. But all the scripts were written when we went to New York. And yeah, he brought me mostly to be a voiceover artist. And I had never been a puppeteer. So my puppeteering skills were slow.
All of our skills were you know, we were learning on the job.
I could do the flower, you know, but I had Globey, and Globey was a remote out of control. His mouth would just go all the time, and he would start spinning, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything. So he was kind of hard to operate. And then Cowntess was this enormous cow that went over my body, and then I had to manipulate the eyes with a stick and this solid plastic mouth that I, you know.
It's my fault. I built that puppet. I built Cowntess, and I didn't know what I was doing at all. And it was a torture device.
The second year, Van Snowden, who was HR Puffin Stuff, a wonderful, wonderful puppeteer, volunteered to get inside the body. So all I had to do was go woo from the side.
Nice.
It also had sticks on the ears, rods on the ears, so the ears would twitch.
Which I barely ever touched.
Well, we would have a second ear guy. When you were inside, somebody else would be doing
okay.
ears.
Yeah.
The ear guy.
I remember trying to build that cow because he wanted a realistic cow. And man, it is really hard to make a realistic cow.
Yeah.
You know?
It was a beautiful puppet. I mean,
Thanks.
it's a beautiful
It
puppet.
kept looking like a horse. You know, I really struggled with that face. But I was just watching Cowntess and the cowboy, and it works. She's got the pearls. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It just was at a really hard mouth to operate.
Yeah, I know. I made that mouth badly. I can say that about all the puppets I made. I made them badly.
Not the flowers. The flowers were gold.
I didn't make the flowers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nice save, George.
How about Randy? Did you make Randy badly?
I made Randy the first year. This is one of the stories I tell all the time. I carved him out of a big block of white pine. His head weighed about 10 pounds. I didn't know what I was doing. He was like, you ever made marionettes before? Oh yeah, sure. Here. I carved him, and I would drop him into the scene, and his head was so heavy and out of balance, he'd just start spinning like the Exorcist. Cut. And I'd be like, my other marionettes, desperate. And he was a piece of folk art, basically on a 12-foot strings, dropped him down into the scene. He was very hard to operate. That's me up in the
Nice.
me in Raptors working Randy in the first season there in that New York loft.
That's great.
Memories.
So you would just drop him down, voice him from above. They'd have you mic'd.
Yeah, I was mic'd, and we hardly ever went back in. We did live voices for all the puppets. Yeah.
And while we're with you, Wayne, Dirty Dog, because you're a musician yourself, how much of your own, how much did you contribute to the puppet band?
I'm an amateur musician. I'm not a real musician, but I love music, and I had a lot of fun designing the puppet band. That's the original drawing I did.
Oh, nice.
For Dirty Dog, and it was the design. The three big designers on the show was Gary Pander, Rick Heitzman, and me. And Gary, of course, was from the original stage show, and Gary brought Rick in, and Rick did a lot of the sets, and Gary did a lot of the sets, but I did most of the puppets, and designed them and built them. And then when we moved to California, the second season, we rebuilt the puppets using professional puppet makers in LA, and they kept my look, but they were so much better designed as operational, so, but Dirty Dog was probably one of my favorites, along with Randy. It was fun to work with Rick Heitzman and Allison Warwick as Chicky Baby. It was always very musical, there was always kind of rhyming, and it was really a lot of fun to do those three together.
And we just, as long as we're talking about Dirty Dog and Randy, we cannot forget Mr. Kite, because we love
yeah, rain, rain, Pee-wee, rain. Yeah.
Just to bring us up to speed on the Playhouse, Pee-wee's Playhouse ran from 1986 to 1990, 5 seasons, 45 episodes, so many Emmys. George and Wayne, you were both there from the very beginning. Wayne, you were picked up off the street as an artist, as a delinquent artist, and George, you came over to be a cow that looked like a horse, right?
Yeah. Well, it started all in California. We had our offices, the writers had their offices on Sunset Boulevard at first, and then we all moved to Paul's house because it was easier for Paul. And so the 5 of us, there were 5 of us, myself, John Paragon, Max Robert, Mike Varhall, and Paul. And we wrote the first season starting in this little office. And Wayne's, I didn't know Wayne then, but Wayne was a constant participant via the fax machine of pictures, drawings of different puppets. There'd be like 6 Globies for Paul to pick from. Yeah. And then he'd want 6 more. And he was picking the puppet as we were making them up.
Yeah, and I was hired in New York City through a production company called Broadcast Arts, and a wonderful woman named Prudence Fenton, who went on to become my champion in a lot of showbiz endeavors, hired me at Broadcast Arts when I showed her my portfolio of puppets and stuff. I'd done one other kid show before that in Nashville, a local kid show called Mrs. Kabobbles Caboose. You can find that on YouTube still. And I had my Mrs. Kabobbles Caboose portfolio with me, and Prudence really dug it. And she gave me a big break. I owe Prudence so much. And if she's out there right now, thank you, Prudence.
She had so much to do with the theme song, with the look of it, with the Penny cartoon. Those were all her babies, pretty much. Nice. She was fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Hey, George. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Wayne.
Yeah, Prudence is definitely one of the founding women of a very important person in the Playhouse.
Yeah.
So George, you mentioned the song. You wrote the song, correct?
Yeah, I wrote I'll tell you the whole thing. Paul takes me into his dressing room and he says, "You want to write a theme song for the show?" Because I had done a lot. I had written a couple of little songs, but I had done a lot of song improv at the Groundlings. And I said, sure. I said, what do you want it to be? And he went like this. I want it to be something like Betty Boopy. Come on in and pull yourself up a chair. And I went, okay. And so I went back to my hotel room and I used that as the opening line. And then I wrote the rest of it. He said he wanted to include the names of all the puppets and not the live characters. So I did that. And so I sang it. I wrote it up on the legal pad that I sent you a picture of.
Oh yeah, we have that in our on our site.
And so I brought it in the next day and I sang it to him and he loved it. And then we sang it into a little tape recorder. And basically what we sang to the tape recorder is what it turned out to be. We sent it to Mark Mothersbaugh. He didn't change the tune. He just orchestrated it and sort of, you know, put the music behind it. And then that was that. And then a couple of weeks later, Paul had asked Cyndi Lauper to record it. So we went to CBS on 57th Street. Cyndi Lauper shows up with this girl named Ellen Foley. And Cyndi says she doesn't want to do it because she's trying to change her image from girls just want to have fun to true colors. She wants to be taken seriously as a singer and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, boy.
So she had this girl, I don't mean blah, blah, blah in a bad way. I was totally like, oh, Cyndi Lauper's here. She had Ellen Foley sing it. And Ellen Foley was fine, but she wasn't Cyndi Lauper. And Paul just twisted Cyndi Lauper's arm. And so Cyndi Lauper did it, but she made Ellen Foley get the credit in the credits. So it says on the show, it says theme song sung by Ellen Foley.
Oh.
And Cyndi never really, I've never seen an interview where she spoke about it, but that's what really happened is that she sang it. And
Wow.
she really sang it. Yeah.
That's a complicated story if you're Ellen Foley, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't really know that. I didn't know that. That's wild.
Well, George makes up stuff too. You
A
know.
lot of stuff, especially about my songs.
You know, the way George describes how that song came about, that was Paul's working method a lot. And back to what Bill said earlier, the fact that he started at improv, and of course the sacred mantra of improv is yes and, right? You just keep expanding. And that's how Paul dealt with a lot of the creative decisions. I would send him a picture, you know, fax him a picture of Globey, and he'd go, yes, and more. And so he was given that improv spirit and that improv interrogation to everything. And it really was subversive.
Let's talk about Globey's nose, because that came up yesterday. And I think we have some art for that. So what happened? What the heck happened to Globey? He got a nose job after the first season.
He got a whole complete facial redo. When I looked for the picture of the original Globey yesterday, I was like, ooh, is that what Globey used to look like? I not even remembered him that way. But I do remember that after the first season, there were a lot of things from the first season that Paul didn't like from the broadcast arts people. So the first episode of season 2, Paul and I wrote season 2, just the two of us. And the first episode was Playhouse makeover or something like that. And Paul was in work clothes and things were being pulled out of the walls. Everything was being changed around so that Paul would like it better. And one of the things he didn't like was Globey. So when he hated Globey for some reason, maybe the fact that Globey was always going spinning. But so Paul went to the place, I guess, where they were building the new Globey, and he took the clay and he made Globey's nose the way he wanted Globey to be. So he had a totally different nose, totally different eyes. He was much less round looking and more sort of Mediterranean kind of looking. But there were a lot of things that Paul didn't like from season 1 on the set, puppets that didn't make it that he put in, Clocky and Flory, and a lot of set issues that he changed in that first episode and under the guise of Playhouse makeover.
Yeah.
But really, I don't like this, get it out of here makeover.
He took out Mutant Toys and replaced it with Clocky, the second, that famous circle thing.
Yeah.
And yesterday when we were talking, I asked about the mutant toys because in the first episode that we all watched together from the first season, which was the Countess and the Cowboy, I think, we see the mutant toys, and I thought, oh, I wonder if you guys got that from Sid in Toy Story, or if Sid in Toy Story got that from you. And the answer is?
Well, the answer is, I'm sorry, but Pixar totally ripped us off. Ripped us off on Mutant Toys. When I saw that in Toy Story, I was like, oh man, I mean, come on. Yeah, that was That was I didn't have anything to do with mutant toys, so I really wasn't too mad, but I was, you know, yeah, that was originally a Pee-wee concept. And
You can't blame them. They can barely make ends meet.
yeah, I know. It's like, you know, come on, give them a break.
Yeah.
And also The Martian.
Oh yeah, Roger the Monster, the big one-eye thing. That's another thing Pixar ripped off for Monsters Inc. And that was my design. And I was Roger the Monster. I was also in that latex torture device thing that had 2 appearances, Roger the Monster.
Oof.
This is the life of an artist. Either they're ripping you off or they're ripping off your clay nose.
I loved every minute of it. The original appearance, I'll just say this, the original appearance of Roger the Monster was in the first season. I don't know which episode, but if you look closely, when I'm hopping, my Chuck Taylor Converse, red Converses can be seen for about a second. The rubber lifts up and you can see a tennis shoe real quick.
That's an Easter.
That's an Easter egg.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's like you can only find that here, right?
Yes.
Right, Wayne?
That's info that's only here in this valuable Zoom. Here's my original drawings for Flory.
Oh, Flory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
3 of them, and Paul picked that one. And it's funny because George came up with Flory, and he thought Flory was just going to be a piece of linoleum or something. And I came in with this big fractured wooden face because Paul's bedroom had a fractured wooden floor. But Paul liked it. And,
It was great. It was great. And
yeah,
Kevin Carlson was the voice of Flory, and that was one of his best things. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great croaky voice. I would work that puppet with Kevin underneath the floor. I'd do the spinning eyeballs, and he would work the mouth.
I want to segue us from the origins, which was great. Thank you. I do love this. Gary Panter, who was one of your fellow visual artists, described it as the hippie dream, a show made by artists. So that's a cool thing. I want to segue into some of the more elements of the show. But I want to round back to you, Billy, and ask you, going all the way back in the 80s, this was originally designed as a kids show for adults to be performed after hours with drinks on the Sunset Strip, correct? Well, at the Groundlings and then at the Sunset Strip.
Yeah. No, I as I recall, he wanted to sell it as a late night show, which everybody always did because, you know, like, it'll be cheap and blah, 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 you know, and it was never sold as a kid show. It's kind of a frightening kid show in many ways, but not the Saturday morning, but the stage version. I wanted to say that with the when you were talking about like being on the show and all that, you know, playing something in the show. At one point, I think before we're going to Roxy, Paul informs me that I'm understudying Captain Carl, like Phil Hartman, and I'm like, sorry, I was terrified, and luckily I never had to do it because I would like try to stay out of sight most of the time, just so he wouldn't go like, hey, maybe you can replace Phil tonight. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things I was doing a lot of fun reading, and Jonah Weiner in New York Times Magazine, 2016, talked about the anarchic queerness of the show. And he said one of the greatest achievements of Playhouse was that it created a place where desires are not policed, otherness is not demonized, gender roles are juggled, and erotic energies attach where they will. And he goes on to give certain examples. He was talking about Reba and breaking down the male lady. Long before we were talking about gender in ways that were off the binary, we had Jambi, who was one of the first men wearing lipstick on network TV, much less on Saturday morning. In one of the episodes, we saw Cowboy Curtis, when he gets his new boots, they are quite blingy. We have Tito in his Speedo. We have in the episode, the Countess and the cowboy, Pee-wee, pretending to be Miss Yvonne and really getting into character. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that element of, was it intentional to really be pushing the boundaries as far as you could, knowing you were on Saturday morning television on CBS?
I think one thing that Paul was very big on, and I think groundbreaking on, was the diversity of the cast and the kinds of characters that didn't call for diversity, but he made them diverse. And there wasn't really a gay character in the show per se, but there were a lot of gay jokes. I mean, you mentioned Cowboy Curtis's boots, and it's like, boots. Oh, you have got big feet. Well, you know what they say, big feet, big boots. I mean, there was a lot of those kind of jokes that were sort of in the gay world. I think it's really just who the writers were. I mean, there was a lot of, I'm gay, John Paragon was gay, other gay, Max Robert was gay. I think our sense of humor was gay-ish, so I think that's why it was. And Paul had no qualms about flipping anything. I mean, there's that whole sequence in Pajama Party where he marries a fruit salad.
Right. That's a whole different sexuality.
And he totally plays it as if he's really in love with the fruit salad, and the fruit salad has a little veil, and everybody there is like, ooh, oh. I mean, he didn't mind screwing up with people's perceptions of what seems right. I think that was mostly.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think that's mostly what it was, is he was always eager to flip expectations of what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And, Paul was such an androgynous character himself as Pee-wee that everything seemed fine. It didn't seem like Pee-wee Herman ever thought like, gee, sex. It wasn't a topic for him. You know what I mean? It wasn't a point of view that he had. So everything, the non-point of view, was what made it so open to so many different things.
Well, the most we had is sometimes that confusion, like in any single thing where you like, well, they're about to put him in the straitjacket now if he keeps that confusion up.
Well, it was ambiguous. I mean, he did lust after Missy Vaughn every now and then.
Yeah.
Right?
Everybody did.
But then when Cowboy Curtis tries to kiss him, he gets all mad and embarrassed, and he's all, get off! Come on, stop! He's a little kid again. He's like, stop fooling around. And,
well, in the stage show
adorable.
with Captain Carl, I always thought it was, he's playing the gruff guy, like terrified of women, which goes back to what, the 1930s. I mean, the cowboys, the straight and silent type, would be like, "Oh, howdy, man," because shaking in their boots because a woman is around, which I thought was fascinating.
Everybody was kind of a child. All the characters were pretty much a child's version of what an adult would be. But at the same time, it was totally for adults. It was made for adults. Yeah. It was made for, specifically at that time, the baby boomer generation who'd grown up on kids' TV, who'd grown up on all that cheap local kiddie TV programs that every city had that ran the Popeye cartoons. It was all about that. It was all about us laughing at the past. And the stage show, you're right, the original stage show was very adult and very funny and really went darker. And it was
dark.
It blew my mind when I saw it in Tennessee on HBO. And ever in my wildest dreams that I think I'd be working for that, or working with the great Gary Panner, which I can't say enough about. Gary was the original stage show designer, graphic designer, a hero of mine that's another dream came true that I got to know him, become friends with him, and work on the show. It was I really bonded with those guys on that show. And that freedom that Paul brought to it, the openness about sexuality and gender roles and stuff, included weirdo hillbilly artist boys like me and Gary and Rick too. It was just a complete crazy mix.
Yeah.
And Paul was our champion, you know.
And one of the things too that I don't think the kid show was ever a parody of a kid show. It was, there were things in here that were tributes to kid show.
Yeah.
We had Magic Screen because Paul had some, I don't know what show it was, but some show when he was growing up had a magic screen.
Garfield
that would show little documentaries and little fun, you know, things like that. His use of old cartoons, the king of cartoons would come in and drag in some cartoon from 1946, you know, and Paul admired that stuff. He loved that stuff. So it never was really a parody of a kid show. And also the quality of the actors. You know, Essa Pathan Murkinson brought so much to what could have been nothing as Reba the Mail Lady. Larry Fishburne as Cowboy Curtis. I mean, they played everything so well. And Lynn Stewart as Missy Vaughn.
Phil Hartman as Captain Carl in the first season. And Vic Trevino in the remaining seasons as Ricardo. They were just so good. They were just so invested in making it be good. And they were all good actors. So everything, nobody played it for me. You know, Lynn Stewart legitimately played the most beautiful puppet woman in Puppetland. Yes.
She played it as if she was the most beautiful, literally the most beautiful. Every puppet would have to gasp when she came in. And she just played it so wholeheartedly, as did they all, that's what made it less of a parody. It made it seem less like we were taking a shot at kid shows as opposed to creating this world of these wonderful characters.
Well, and she played it as like Glinda the Good Witch, but also, you know, some of the.
Yeah.
No, I think it's more like those 1940s, you know, tragic actress, Susan Hayworth, you know, like on a dime, she would go to that. Really? Is she pretty? You know, it was so funny.
Yeah, you're right. It was more than a parody. It wasn't cynical. It had heart, you know, and that's what came through big time. We weren't cynical about it. We weren't cynical about our designs. We loved what we were doing. The actors loved what they were doing. It was a very positive vibe.
My fellow professor, Constance Penley, hi Connie, is asking, how and why did CBS let you get away with all the double entendre and sexual shenanigans?
2 words, Judy Price. Judy Price was, I mean, I worked on many shows afterwards, and I never, ever worked with any network executive like her. The only censorship there ever was, the whole time that I was there, was when Pee-wee came out of the bathroom with toilet paper stuck to his shoe. They didn't want us to have Pee-wee have toilet paper stuck to his shoe. That's the only note we ever got from them regarding censoring something or questioning it. She was, I worked with her again on Riders in the Sky. She was just fantastic. She'd come over to the office and holler and go, "How's my little geniuses? Who wants to go to lunch?" And she was just so into it. And it was her vision that let it happen, because, you know, Paul had a lot of things that cost a lot of money that were being approved and whatever. And like I said, no censorship at all, no questioning. Nobody ever said, I don't think you can really say that. And she had a little team that worked with her, but she was the queen of it. And she was so behind the show. It was fantastic. I never had that experience again with anyone but her.
No, that wouldn't happen today.
Yeah,
That
was great.
And to have an executive just say, you know, "How's my little geniuses?"
Yeah.
And "Let me take you out to lunch."
exactly.
Very rare,
Exactly.
very precious.
She was wonderful.
Connie has another excellent question that I want to ask. I want to put to all of you. So Pee-wee's Playhouse parodied Saturday morning children's television shows, but also the advertising element that had been embedded into those same shows, that was usually divided into girl products and boy products with a strict gender divide. And she's asking, can you talk about the way that the Playhouse criticized and did a send up of the gender divide in advertising and programming for children?
Well, there was certainly a gender challenge. He challenged the role, like Dixie, the cab driver, the first season. She was very like masculine and swaggering and stuff like that. But that doesn't really address the question. You're talking about like.
I mean, I think we can expand the question just to say, to talk about how Pee-wee, well, and I think we sort of did touch on some of the different ways in which the characters and the stories do
Well,
gender expectations.
I think Pee-wee was all about, let's put on a show and let's play with toys and let's have pure joy and let's be silly, which is something that is not taught to young boys at all in our culture on a general basis. He made it okay for say a young boys to like to be silly and play with crazy toys and stuff like that. That might not be such an issue now, but when I was growing up, that was the no-no. You know, you don't act silly, you don't run around crazy like that. You know, you act like a man, you play sports, you know. I don't want to see you, you know, maybe that's just my hang-ups. But I think he gave permission for kids to act silly. And a lot of kids are oppressed when they act silly. They're told to snap out of it. Don't be silly.
Yeah.
You know? And that's kind of, for me, that was a real incredible, joyful thing that he brought that I think kind of, maybe not so much now, but back then, or earlier in our culture, it would break down the gender roles, because girls are allowed a little more fun, have a little more fun, and boys are expected to be more stoic and you know, not indulge in their silly side. So I thought that was a real cool thing.
I want to read this. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm agreeing.
I want to read this quote because I thought this was really interesting too, and it's perspective I never thought of. I think this is from John Weiner's article also in the New York Times Magazine in 2016. And he's talking about how Reubens revitalized Saturday morning programming, which was at that time a wasteland of cheap animated series that were mostly glorified toy commercials, by discovering this aesthetic wormhole that connected late night comedy from the Roxy and the Groundlings to early morning children's programming. The sensibility of stoned 20-somethings at midnight, he realized, marked by an unreasonable love of repetition, absurdity, narrative disjuncture, and jokes that either last way too long or flit by in short attention span blinks, had a significant overlap. He says that late night sensibility had a significant overlap with that of little kids in their pajamas laughing themselves silly over sugared breakfast cereal. Quote, "Those are the times of day when there aren't any rules," Reubens said of morning and night, standing as they do at idiosyncratic opposition to the more conventional programming on prime time and in between. He said, rules are for other times, not for Saturday morning. Is that kind of the ethos that you were developing under?
There were no rules to what happened on Pee-wee's Playhouse. I mean, it was a grab bag. There were so many things. You could cut away to the refrigerator vegetables doing a little shtick, and the dinosaur family, and the puppet band. There was always something going on, and there weren't rules as to what had to happen. There were stories, gentle stories, I like to say, that were in the show, but a gentle story about, come on, let's have a pajama party, could turn into marrying fruit salad. I mean, unpredictable things happened every other minute on Pee-wee's Playhouse. And even the way Paul would react to something, he could be really mad about something, he could be really bratty about something, he could be deliriously happy about something, and you never really quite knew what you were going to get, even within the basis of a storyline. It was completely unpredictable for kids, and I think just that the juxtaposition of this happening, that happening, this happening, that happening, now what? Let's go over here, let's see what this is doing, let's go over here. It was that sort of thing that you just never knew what was going to happen. And when we were first writing the shows, most of the scripts were just about, okay, now let's find a place for the dinosaur family. Let's find a place for the cartoon guy, King Cartoons, to come in. And it was just a way to combine all these numerous bits that were in the show. And it was less about what's the story about. The story was just something to hang all these little bits on. So it was very unpredictable.
I want to quote Judd Apatow. He says, when I was younger, I didn't put my finger on why I liked Pee-wee so much, but looking back, it's simple. It's a group of strange people who are having a great time and being nice to each other.
Yeah.
Let me just add also that Mary Poppins, I forgot about Mary Poppins, huge impact on my childhood. I worshiped that movie. I drew pictures of it constantly. I wanted to be Bert with the one-man band. I wanted to draw the pictures on the sidewalk and jump into the pictures and become real. And that's what Pee-wee's Playhouse was for me, was getting to draw that picture and jump into that picture. And that's like a fantasy that's stuck in my head. Also, Viewmaster. I wanted to go into those Viewmaster scenes that I would see as a kid. I was like, what is this? So uncanny. It blew my mind.
It's a time machine.
Especially those little tableaus they'd create from flat cartoons and make them three-dimensional, like Bugs. This is the real Bugs Bunny. This is where he really lives. And they got pictures of the real Bugs Bunny running down a road. I was just like, what? So the Playhouse was like my Viewmaster also. It was my Bert drawing on the sidewalk and Viewmaster. Those were the two things that really blew my mind as a kid. And I thought about those all the time while I was doing Pee-wee. Definitely.
We've talked, I want to bring it home with one last question for all three of you. And it's inspired by George, you saying the reason Paul hired you was because of what was your favorite thing in the original show that Billy was on. But I want to ask each one of you, what in your memory is your favorite thing that you contributed? Whether it's a line or an image or a character, what's your favorite thing that you contributed to the Pee-wee Herman show? And we'll bring it home with that.
I have one.
Herman or Playhouse.
So there was a segment or a section called Pen Pals from Around the World, which is such a kid's thing anyway. Pen Pals from Around the World. And then they read these pen pals from around the world. They read the short letters. And this is my favorite, because I know I wrote this whole thing. Mailman Mike gives him a letter and he says, here's a letter from Israel. And Pee-wee says, Shalom, reading the letter. Shalom, Pee-wee. My name is Shlomo. I'm 9 and have been in the army 2 years already. If you want to know more about my country, just read the Bible.
I remember that. That was a good one.
Funny.
George, what's yours?
I would have to say two things. One was the theme song, of course. The other was, there was an episode that was written on the season Paul and I wrote called Pee-wee's Country Cousin. And Pee-wee's country cousin was like from Tennessee or something, and he comes to visit the Playhouse, and Paul, it was going to be like the Patty Duke show. Paul was going to play both parts. Yes. And the Friday before the Monday that was supposed to film, Paul said, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And I said, what do you mean you don't want to do it? I'm too exhausted. I don't want to do it. So I had to write an episode over the weekend for them to start shooting on Monday called Tons of Fun. And it was literally, it was like, hey, Lynn, what do you want to do? Oh, I haven't gotten to clog dance. It was just, it was things like that. Like, what would be fun? With no, I knew I had a weekend to do it, and it wasn't supposed to be great, but it was really fun for me to write it because it was just, and it's still one of my favorite episodes because it's just that, tons of fun.
Tons of fun.
You know what we're watching tonight? Like I've got it all queued up. We're watching Tons of Fun. Wayne, what's yours?
I'd say two things also. My contribution to the set design, my specialty was the wallpaper designs, and nearly all the wallpapers are my design, and every shot has some kind of scheme of mine in the background. So I'm really proud of that. That's kind of my pervasive touch to the set. And then I guess Randy would have to be my favorite puppet I did. The fact that I went into it so incompetent, but it scared me so much that I learned quickly how to do it right. And I did. I got better and better at it. I'm proud that I hung in there and didn't freak out. And it became one of the, everybody says it's, everybody says it's their favorite puppet that talks to me. Of course, that's probably,
But it was fantastic. And it served a great purpose for the writing, because as bad as Pee-wee would be about anything, he didn't have to be Randy bad.
Yeah.
Randy came in and just had the worst, most horrible schemes.
Yeah.
That got Paul to be the good guy when otherwise it would be people going, let's do this crazy thing. It would be like Randy trying to make him do it. He'd be like, no, Randy.
Yeah. Any performer can tell you it's a blast to play the villain. It's so much fun to play bad.
Yeah.
And I really grew in my own humble way. I grew as an actor and a performer doing Randy with my scenes with Paul. I learned about rhythm and how to work a scene, and I really advanced a lot as a performer through Randy, and he was funny, and it was great. It was just plus it was something I never thought I would do ever, and it was wonderful.
You have a real Southern accent, which you very seldom see. You see actors trying to do it, but you have a real one, and it's
Well, you know what? I tried to get them to let me do Randy with a Southern accent, but they wouldn't go for it, because all the bullies I knew had Southern accents.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Wayne and Billy and George. This was wonderful.
Thanks, Cheri.
Thank you, Cheri.
Bye-bye, everybody.